ديمة خير وعطاء ويمام نقاء وسخاء يا نجما شع فأبهجنا يا شعلة نور والله يا ديمة خير وعطاء ويمام نقاء وسخاء يا نجما شع فأبهجنا.
Yeah. What usage have you got? Have you got any Arabic literature that goes back to the time that says that?
They did. Pagans had a deity called by that name. So I know they did.
I've never heard of a deity called Allah. Is that familiar?
There is a deity called that.
Anyway, we can look at it. Okay. But you see, the question now becomes, why is Allah using certain words? When Allah says, okay, have the unbelievers not seen the heavens and the earth was joined together as one piece, and Allah brought every living thing from water? Why did He combine biology with astrophysics? You might ask, you can ask millions of questions and zillions of questions like this. Allah can decide the way He wants to present His message and the evidence for His message. So the question is there a scientific mistake? That was the question that is being alluded to. There was a mistake when we were saying, oh, you left Islam because various reasons, and obviously all the reasons are coming from, not from his knowledge, coming from his absence of knowledge. Okay, so if I asked him about the challenge of the Quran, as a Muslim he didn't even know. I mean, he said, oh, it's like the Torah and so on. I mean, what can I say? So the discussion, when we say the Quran, who's the author of the Quran, you should have a viable hypothesis which is rationally sound if it's not from Allah. Everything that you bring falls apart because some of the information the Quran mentions could not have been produced by or uttered by human beings then, unless you believe in extraterrestrials and extraterrestrials did it.
Do you know what? Yeah, my problem is with what you were saying is not my problem. I don't have an initial problem. It's that this is the first time I've heard anybody explain it the way that you explained it. Even the brother that attempted to back you up was referring to the cylinder, 3-dimensional, this is where the semen comes from the back and so forth. Everybody amongst the Muslim world that I'm familiar with, always explains that first, referring to the semen and so forth. So you was the first person to bring that up, and I just wanted to know that. Wow, that was amazing. I don't have no problem with it because I'll have to investigate.
If I was the first person to say the Quran talks about the Big Bang, using this concept of the Big Bang, would that be a problem? Because the Quran describes the common origin of the universe, and science talks about this the Big Bang.
As I said, I don't have no problem. I said it's amazing. I've never heard that before. And I said, it's interesting for me to actually put my interest to investigate.
It's because people are not reading about this in detail.
Yeah. But as I've been a Muslim for 10 years, I've never heard anybody explain that verse in the way that you wish to project it. It's the sperm that emerges rather than, or the fluid that emerges rather than the man.
I've read it in several places like that. I've heard Muslims explain it several times like that. So this is the first time. Hold on. I'm hearing somebody explain it.
My lack of knowledge is not a proof, by the way. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's the first time. It's the first time.
It is generally explained this way because this is what people immediately think refers to the noun that is immediate.
Yes.
But actually, if you look at it, in the context, because if you find that if it refers to the noun immediate, and now you have some issues people are raising, okay, look into the issues we're actually talking to. If you have another alternative explanation, which is sound, linguistically backed up,
I've definitely heard another.
There you go.
I've definitely heard another explanation.
Because that understanding I can corroborate from my little lack of Arabic.
Do you know why? You know why this is backed up in so many angles? The word tara'ib in the Arabic language, by the consensus, refers to the female anatomy. That's the part of her body, upper chest, where the necklace is hanging. We know one of the mu'allaqat for Imrul Qais, it says muhafhafatun bayda'u ghayru mufadatin tara'ibuha masqulatun kasajanjali. It is by the consensus of Arabic linguists, the tara'ib only once mentioned the whole of the Quran. Okay, so there's no other word explaining what it means, but the consensus of the Arabic linguists, it refers to the female anatomy. Just like there are other private parts of the female anatomy only applicable to them by name. So you can't use the name for a man, for example, right? So if it is by consensus referring to the female anatomy, but it refers to what? In between the backbone and ribs of who? The sperm is not coming from the woman. how can it even apply to the man? Do you see my point?
I hear you.
How can it even apply to the man? Because it's referring to a female anatomy, and the sperm doesn't come from the woman, it comes from the man.
I hear you.
Unless it refers to, because it doesn't talk about the sperms, right? It talks about the fluid, the reproductive fluid. And the woman also has reproductive fluid. The woman is also discharged, whether it refers to her discharge. And you can open up a lot of interpretation, and all of them will be scientifically correct.
Because I've heard this explanation from another school of thought, which is an ancient Egyptian school of thought, where practically near enough the same words as mentioned in the Quran is mentioned in earlier ancient Egyptian texts. Let me actually get it quickly, because I actually had to snap it, because I thought, ooh, this was amazing. I like interesting things. And it says here, no, this is in Edfu, the temple of Edfu, basically. And it says here, it is he who created his seed in the bones and in the belly. Okay?
He who created his seed in the bones and the belly.
Yeah. So the sperm was created from in between the
when you say in between,
the
does
bones.
it say in between?
Yeah, it says here.
Where does it say in between?
Sorry, the bones and in the belly.
So it's not in between. It's different.
It's different.
Just like Hippocrates said,
it's
the
different.
sperm is created in the brains and diffuses all over the body and goes through the kidneys and so on.
Okay, it's different in terms of translation, but in terms of the preposition inside of English, in terms of the ancient Egyptian language, it literally means within. Within, that's what it literally means. Ma literally means within. So you've got the Egyptian text here, and it's
So how
about
would
the
you
bones.
translate that? Translate it literally.
So if I was to translate this literally, it would say here. Okay, so the sperm, his sperm is within the bones and within the body or the belly, basically, the gut.
Yeah, but that's not true though, it's not correct.
That region.
In every shape and form.
So,
sperm is not created in the belly in the bones.
Let me just give it to you. So this text was given, but the interpretation of the text was talking about there is a particular area within inside of your back, your spinal fluids, your spine, where the center that operates your semen being ejaculated comes from that spot in between.
What comes from there?
How can I explain it? Because I'm passing on information.
Are you talking about nutrients or anything like that?
No. I'm talking about the spinal cord. There is the spine. What's that thing called now? In between in the spinal cord. No. The actual nerves themselves, the nerve system themselves. Within that, the lumbar something. Don't quote me. In between there, that is responsible for the sexual region of ejaculation, basically.
Does it say sperm comes from there?
No, I'm simply. The sperm doesn't come from there. Sperm obviously comes from the testes. But it's saying that when a man gets his backbone destroyed, his ability to have sex is completely gone. So the interpretation was that's where the sperm is created from.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You can explain that, but obviously the text doesn't say that it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
Is that interpretation? When is the interpretation from? During the time of the text, or much later?
Much later on.
Much later, when people know about science.
Yeah.
So the text doesn't support
So
the interpretation. The interpretation is now forced onto the text from modern science.
Definitely, just the same way
Fair
as
enough.
miracles in the Quran is the same thing.
Not really. Not really. No. This is where we have to talk.
Because for example, we can say, oh, so did the Arab pagans knew that the sperm came from and ribs and so forth?
Okay.
No, it's actually found that much later on, and it's read into the text.
So when the Quran talks about in this verse, ma'un dafiq, a water that is self-emitting, by doing it itself, is that an interpretation forced into the text? Or is the literal interpretation? In the Quran, let man observe what is created from a fluid that is self-emitting. Is this a forced interpretation? Eisegesis?
It says that. It says
that.
Literally, then that's what it says.
Literally, so it's not forced. So when we talk about the Quranic scientific wonders, we are not forcing it. It's there within the literal text. That's why I beg to disagree with you.
But that's what I'm saying to you. That's something that's observed. You can literally see when you're when your sperm comes out, you can see it's emitting.
It's self-emitting.
Self-emitting. The water itself is the own driver. We know the sperm propels by itself. It wiggles with its tail by itself.
Yeah. No? Don't the little, from what I understand, the little
These
tail things in the
spermatozoa,
head, they actually emit themselves, they move
themselves,
they
they're
meet the egg.
self-motile.
There's nothing pushing them.
Okay, I'm with you.
That's what the text itself
Oh, so you're
refers
saying
back
that the Quran actually knows that and
to.
it's stating
I'm
it
saying
there.
that the text, the word dafit, relates to that.
It says David.
I said swimming. Swimming. No, swimming.
Nobody else knew about that.
People may have known this,
yeah.
because I cannot say nobody knows because I haven't studied every single thing of the past. But this is self-interesting. Within the Arabian Peninsula, the knowledge all that is around, this is something that people, as far as I know.
Interesting.
I'm saying they move. They do move. Yeah, they do move. What I'm saying is, what is causing them?
I was offered a position as Associate Professor of Medicine and Chief of Scientific Visualization at Yale University in the Department of Medicine. And my job was to write many of the algorithms and code for NASA to do virtual surgery in preparation for the astronauts going into deep space flight so they could be cut in robotic pods. One of the fascinating things about what we were actually working on is that we were seeing, using the new kind of scanning technologies, things that had never been seen before. I mean, not only in disease management, but also things that allowed us to see things about the body that just made you marvel. I remember one of the first times we were looking at collagen, and your entire body, everything, your hair, skin, bone, nails, everything is made of collagen, and it's a kind of a rope-like structure that twirls and swirls like this, and the only place that collagen changes its structure is in the corner of your eye. In your eye, it becomes a grid formation, and therefore it becomes transparent as opposed to opaque. So perfectly organized a structure, it was hard not to attribute divinity to it, because we kept on seeing this over and over and over again in different parts of the body. One of the opportunities I had was, one person was working on a really interesting kind of micromagnetic resonance imaging machine with the NIH, and what we were going to do is scan a new project on the development of the fetus from conception to birth using these kinds of new technologies. So I wrote the algorithms and code, and he built the hardware. Paul Lauterbro then went on to win the Nobel Prize for inventing the MRI. I get the data, and I'm going to show you a sample of that piece from conception to birth. Thank you. But as you can see, when you actually start working on this data, it's pretty spectacular. And as we kept on scanning more and more, working on this project, looking at these two simple cells that had this kind of unbelievable machinery that will become the magic of you. And as we kept on working on this data, looking at small clusters of the body, these little, pieces of tissue that were the trophoblast coming off of the blastocyst, all of a sudden burrowing itself into the side of the uterus, saying, I'm here to stay. All of a sudden having a conversation of communications of the estrogens, the progesterones, saying, I'm here to stay, plant me, building this incredible trilinear fetus that becomes within 44 days something that you can recognize, and then at 9 weeks is really like a kind of a little human being. The marvel of this information, how do we actually have this biological mechanism inside our body to actually see this information? I'm going to show you something pretty unique. Here's a human heart at 25. It's just basically 2 strands. And like this magnificent origami, cells are developing at 1 million cells per second at 4 weeks as it's just folding on itself. Within 5 weeks, you can start to see the early atrium and the early ventricles. 6 weeks, these folds are now beginning with a papilla in the inside of the heart, actually being able to pull down each one of those valves in your heart until you get actually a mature heart, and then basically the development of the entire human body. The magic of the mechanisms inside each genetic structure saying exactly where that nerve cell should go. The complexity of these, the mathematical models on how these things are indeed done are beyond human comprehension. Even though I'm a mathematician, I look at this with a marvel of how do these instruction sets not make these mistakes as they build what is us. It's a mystery, it's magic, it's divinity. I mean, then when you start to take a look at an adult life, take a look at this little tuft of capillaries. It's just a tiny substructure, microscopic, but basically by the time you're at 9 months and you've given birth, you have almost 60,000 miles of vessels inside your body. I mean, and only 1 mile is visible, 59,999 miles that are basically bringing nutrients and taking waste away. The complexity of building that within a single system is, again, beyond any comprehension of any existing mathematics today. And then instruction set from the brain to every other part of the body. Look at the complexity of the folding. Where is this intelligence of knowing that a fold can actually hold more information? So as you actually watch the baby's brain grow, and this is one of the things that we're doing right now. We're actually doing a longitudinal studies of actually scanning babies' brains from the moment they're born every 6 months until they're 6 years old. We're going to be doing actually about 250 children, watching exactly how the jirai and the sukai of the brains fold to see how this magnificent develop actually turns into memories and the marvel that is us, the magic that is existence that is us. Thank you.
The statements we're about to show you are from the Holy Quran, and is said to be the official, unchanged, pure word of God, revealed over 1400 years ago. Claiming to be the word of God is a heavy statement, and without proof, or if a single contradiction is found within the book, the apparent word of God will be proven false. So without further ado, let's put the book to the test. In the 23rd chapter, titled The Believers, from the 12th to the 14th verses, God is said to give a detailed description of how the human being is formed. It begins by saying, "We then placed him as a sperm drop in a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then we made the drop into a alaqa." We will translate this word very soon. "And then we changed the alaqa into a lump. Then we made out of that lump into bones. And then we clothed the bones with flesh. Then we caused him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive human form." In the 21st century, we can now safely say that this verse is clearly describing the process of human development in correct chronological order. However, what we should be paying attention to in particular is the second stage, referring to the development of the embryo. The specific word used to describe the embryo in this verse is the word alaqa. The word alaqa, when translated into English, can mean 3 separate things. Firstly, a blood clot, or to be suspended, that is to be hanging or clinging to something, or thirdly and finally, a leech. Now, all 3 definitions don't come anywhere near what we perceive to be the human embryo. So, Why are these words used, and what significance do they share with the human embryo? Can the embryo be described as a blood clot? Well, what do you think? In the 3rd week of embryonic development, a tubular heart joins with the blood vessels to form a primordial cardiovascular system, and by the end of the 3rd week, the blood is circulating and the heart begins to beat on day 21. The first thing that comes to mind in regards to being suspended or hanging is the umbilical cord. But we can't use that example because we are simply referring to step 2, before the baby has even formed. But we now know today that the umbilical cord is formed from the connecting stalk. And the connecting stalk is formed as soon as the embryo is formed. The embryo's connecting stalk has even been described by John Allen and Beverly Kramer as an object to suspend the developing embryo in the extra-embryonic column. So an embryo is suspended and does have a strong resemblance with a blood clot. What on earth would an embryo have to do with a leech? Figure A shows the structure of an embryo at 25 days. Figure B shows a leech. Now please note once again that the embryo in this stage is no greater than the size of a kernel of wheat. This is an X-ray of the embryo at 22 days. This is the internal structure of a leech. It's mind-blowing stuff, but you still haven't seen anything yet. This is the head of the embryo at 22 days. The detail you are seeing right now is absolutely impossible to be seen with the human eye and can only be seen with a microscope. This is the back end of a leech. There's no other words used to describe this other than mind-blowing. The pictures we have shown you are impossible to be seen with the human eye or even to be predicted by the human mind. Once again, the verses we have shown you were revealed over 1400 years ago to a man who couldn't read nor write. Are these the words of God?
Descriptions of the human embryo in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad from God, from God, from God, from God.